A massive new report just dropped, and honestly, it's changing how we need to think about taxes. So today, we're going to dig into the 2024 Global Tax Evasion Report and figure out who's paying their fair share and, who's not.
Right. We've all heard this one. Benjamin Franklin. It feels like one of those universal truths, doesn't it? Something that's just baked into the fabric of society. You can't avoid death, and you can't avoid taxes.
Well, what if I told you that for a very specific group of people, that's not really true anymore? This report lays out a pretty startling reality. For the world's super rich, taxes are becoming, well, less of a certainty and more of a choice.
So that brings us to the big questions we're tackling today. How on earth are the wealthiest people on the planet managing to pay so little? And more importantly, is there actually anything we can do to stop it?
The way the report frames it, it's like there are two totally different tax systems operating in parallel. There's one for you and me, and then there's a completely different one for the ultra-wealthy.
And this slide really puts it in black and white. For most people, taxes are a fact of life. We pay them on our paychecks, on things we buy, but for billionaires, it's a whole other universe. Their effective tax rate on their wealth is between 0 and 0.5%. I mean, just let that sink in. That's not on their income. That's on their total wealth. It's almost nothing.
Okay, but it's not all bad news. The report actually kicks off with a story of a huge success, something that proves change is absolutely possible when governments actually decide to work together.
So, the big breakthrough was something that for years people thought was a total pipe dream. It's called the automatic exchange of bank information. Since 2017, more than 100 countries have started automatically sharing data about the bank accounts foreigners hold. This one move pretty much blew the lid off the whole world of secret Swiss bank accounts we always hear about.
And the results? They've been incredible. The report estimates that because of this policy, offshore tax evasion, hiding money abroad, has dropped by a factor of 3 in just a decade.
You can see it so clearly on this chart. Look at that bar on the left. That's how much untaxed offshore wealth there was back in 2013. Now, look at the bar on the right for 2022. It's a massive drop. This shows that this one policy change had a huge real-world impact.
But okay, well that's a huge win. The story doesn't end there. The battle isn't over. The report shines a spotlight on 2 massive challenges that remain. Let's get into them.
The first problem is what's called corporate profit shifting. And the number is just mind-boggling. In 2022 alone, multinational companies managed to shift $1 trillion in profits into tax havens.
So what is profit shifting really? Well, put simply, it's like this. A big global company sells a bunch of stuff in, say, the US or France, where taxes are higher. But through some clever accounting, they make it look like the profits were actually earned in a place like the Cayman Islands, where the tax rate is basically 0, even if they barely have an office there.
And you would think that with all the efforts to stop this, the problem would be shrinking. But nope. As you can see from this chart, the amount of money countries are losing to this has just stayed stubbornly high, hovering around 10% of all corporate tax revenue.
And that brings us to the second huge problem. Remember that number, that 0 to 0.5%? It's not just about what corporations are doing, it's about what the billionaires themselves are doing, or rather, what they're not doing, which is paying income tax.
This chart is just wow. It shows you how the system is supposed to work. For the middle class and even the upper middle class, the more you earn, the higher your tax rate. That makes sense, right? But then you get to the billionaires, and the bar goes down. They actually pay a smaller chunk of their income in taxes than millions of people who earn way, way less. It's wild.
So how do they pull this off? Well, it's a whole playbook of complex strategies. They use webs of shell companies, and they set up these personal holding companies. The whole point is to make sure their massive wealth never technically shows up as income. That way, they can live in this legal gray area, paying almost nothing.
Okay, so that's the problem. It seems pretty big and complicated, so what's the solution? Well, the great thing about this report is that it doesn't just point fingers. It actually lays out a concrete plan to start fixing things.
And it really boils down to 2 big ideas. First, beef up the global minimum tax on corporations to 25% and, crucially, get rid of all the loopholes. And second, create a brand new tax, a global minimum tax just for billionaires, set at 2% of their wealth every year.
So what kind of money are we talking about here? Well, that stronger corporate tax alone, the report estimates it could bring in an extra $250 billion in tax revenue
Every single year.
And the billionaire tax? Almost exactly the same amount, another $250 billion a year. And get this, that money would come from fewer than 3,000 individuals on the entire planet.
So you add those two together, and you're looking at $500 billion a year. To put that into perspective, the report notes that that's enough to cover the entire estimated cost for developing nations to deal with climate change.
And that really brings us to the core message of this whole report, which they sum up perfectly with this quote: "Tax evasion isn't like gravity. It's not some law of nature we just have to accept. It's a choice. It's a direct result of the policies we make, or the ones we failed to make." Look, the success against bank secrecy proved that we can make progress on this stuff when there's political will. The solutions are literally on the table. So the real question isn't, can we do this? It's, will we? What choice will our leaders make now?